everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So it's been a year now since I began my YouTube journey, and I've had a lot of fun making something like 35 videos about nature and photography so far. That said, I have a tiny confession to make. I actually started YouTube on a whim. I had no idea what I was doing, and I also had no plans to keep on making videos. Once I got into it though, I just had so much fun that I kinda never stopped. I'm still by no means an expert at YouTube or videography, but I think I've learned just enough to peel back the curtain a little bit and show you how I film. In today's video, I want to go through some of the tools that I use, a few tips that I've learned, some mistakes that I've made, and I'll end with my favorite and least favorite parts of creating for YouTube. To kick things off, why don't we start by talking about this little wonderful device in my hand, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. As someone that does a lot of solo filming in the great outdoors, my goal is always to pack as light as possible. At the bare minimum, I'm usually lugging around my photography camera with a really big lens, and every time I add an additional lens, a drone, or another video camera, it weighs me down and makes my day harder. And that's where this little wonder camera comes in. At just 172 grams, the Pocket 3 is a lightweight 4K video camera with a built-in gimbal for stabilization. Mine also came with an amazing wireless mic, the DJI Mic 2, giving me a top-notch video and audio setup in the field while adding almost no additional weight. So I use the Pocket 3 to film myself talking as I walk around like this, and I've even mounted it on tripods, in my car, on my bike, and even actually on another camera to give the audience a first-person view of what I can see while I'm shooting. Okay, so next up, I also film with the Nikon ZF, and I use the 24mm f1.8 by Viltrox. Now, sometimes instead I'll bring the 14-30 f4 by Nikon, but if I'm feeling really fancy, I'll film with the 135 1.8 Plena. I'll typically reach for the ZF over the Pocket 3 when I have some extra weight to spare in my bag and I need that full frame look for filming B-roll. I like that it has a fully articulating flippy screen, but I've also learned that sometimes I do have to bring an external monitor when it's really bright outside or when I'm just too far away from the camera. For audio on the ZF, I actually use the same DJI Mic 2 wireless receiver that I use with the Osmo Pocket 3. And in fact, because the DJI Mic 2 comes with two wireless mics, I have one paired with the included receiver and the other one is paired with the Pocket 3. And that means I can just switch cameras without having to repair the mics over and over again. Oh, and here's another tip that took me way too long to learn, but for bright and sunny days, I found that my footage looks way better when I use an ND filter. You see, we're used to seeing a tiny amount of motion blur with our eyes in the real world, and really bright days can cause the shutter speed on your camera to be so fast that every frame is crystal clear, perfectly sharp, and that leads to a lack of motion blur. And without motion blur, the footage is going to look robotic and unnatural. In fact, there's a rule about this that says to make sure that the denominator of your shutter speed is twice your frame rate. So I shoot at 30 frames per second for YouTube, so that means I'd want my video shutter speed to be 1/60th of a second. And very conveniently for today's video, the company Freewell actually kindly sent me this combination ND filter and polarizer to test out and review for you. Now, I love to use this thing on the ZF for video especially because 9 times out of 10, I'm filming in really bright sunny conditions and I'm near water. Only having to attach one filter that can get me the correct frame rate while reducing glare makes everything so much easier. Okay, allow me to demonstrate. So first, let's take a look at what my video looks like at 1/60th of a second on this really bright sunny day. It's way overexposed. Alright, so now I'm going to attach the Freewell filter and you can see how much the exposure has already improved. And this filter is variable, which means you can change the amount of light being filtered, which I like for video out in the field specifically because the conditions are always changing. I also like the quality of this filter and I don't notice any color cast or degradation in my footage, which is always a requirement for me when it comes to filters. Oh, and here, I'll go ahead and put up a before and after. All in all, I'd say this is a nice filter and I appreciate the convenience and the quality of it. So special thanks to Freewell for trusting me with this review, and I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Okay, moving on, it's also worth mentioning that I do capture some footage with the Nikon Z9. While I'm primarily using that as my primary body for wildlife stills, I still use it exclusively for capturing wildlife footage too. I like that it covers the wildlife footage requirement for me with just a flip of a single switch so that I don't have to carry around yet another piece of gear. The Z9 can record in 4K at up to 120 frames per second, and while it's paired with my 300pf or my 500pf, it can actually take some pretty stunning footage. And finally, in terms of video cameras, I have my Mavic 3. The quality of the footage on this drone is outstanding, but if I'm being honest, I've learned that the drone is too big and too heavy for me to lug around most of the time. Now, I'm of course going to hold on to the Mavic 3 because it's an incredible drone, but I've been eyeballing the latest drone in the DJI mini series of drones to use as kind of a lightweight alternative when weight is a consideration. For my bag, I've managed to fit everything into my Shimoda 2 Explore bag. You can buy differently sized inserts for these bags, and I went ahead and shelled out for the largest one they sold. And as you can see here, all of my gear fits nicely into the insert. I also have this cheap plastic container in the top of the bag that's filled with all the little things that I tend to forget for my outings. I'm talking aux cables, tripod mounts, adapters, extra batteries, you name it. In fact, anytime I forget something on a shoot, I make sure it gets permanently added to somewhere in my pack so that I never forget it again. Okay, I think that's probably enough about gear for this video. I've already done a whole What's in My Bag 2024 video that details my whole setup, so I think I'll link to that and leave the gear talk here and move on. And with that, let's move on to talking about a few of the things that I've learned over the past year that might help you on your journey. And tip number one is to spend a lot of time getting used to talking to a camera. When I first started, there was something about the permanence of video that really got into my head when I was filming. I'd hit the record button and my brain would instantly turn to mush. Now, I'm normally pretty comfortable as a public speaker, so this really surprised me. I think for me, it came down to the fact that in normal public speaking and in a normal conversation with somebody, it's completely acceptable to have pauses and ums and ahs, and to not always speak with perfect clarity and concision. On video though, I wanted everything to be perfect, so I'd overthink it, and I'd stumble over my words, leading to take after take after take, and it always felt like I'd forgotten how to say words. My advice here is twofold. One, keep practicing, and two, just let the small mistakes go. Being able to show and laugh at your mistakes, to me at least, makes you come across as a real, genuine human being, and it adds character to your videos. Okay, speaking of mistakes, tip number two is to make a mistakes checklist and use it every time you go out. Every time I make a mistake, I just add it to my list of mistakes so that I can read it over and prevent it from happening again the next time. For example, one day I plugged my aux cable into the headphone jack of my camera instead of the aux-in jack, and I went out and filmed all day. When I got home and realized there was no audio in any of my clips, needless to say, I was devastated. Now it's part of my checklist, and I review that before every take to make sure I have it right. Speaking of, I messed up the white balance for this whole video, so I'll definitely be adding that to my mistakes checklist for next time. Along the same lines, I'd say make sure you have a packing checklist too and treat it the same way. I use mine every morning before I leave to make sure I have all my batteries, memory cards, adapters, any of those things that I would typically forget. Okay, I think I'm telling on myself a little bit here in that I have a lot of audio issues, but tip number three is along the same lines as the first two, and it's to bring headphones and to review your footage before you leave. Now, I don't make videos full time, and I often have one weekend every month to go out and film 4 weeks of videos. That means if I miss a shot or mess up a take, I don't always have time to go back and reshoot it. So reviewing my footage before I leave the site could make the difference between releasing a video on time or frankly not at all for me. And the headphone bit is the important part because it is possible to set your audio levels too low or too high, and that type of thing isn't something that you're always going to notice on your camera speakers. The common theme among all of these tips is advice that is deceptively simple, and it's just plan ahead. Now, for someone like me that goes out to film birds and wildlife, I know that there are parts of the process that can't be predicted and that it would be impossible to plan for. I don't know what birds I'm going to see, and I definitely don't know what the light or the weather is definitively going to look like. But what I can do is think through what shots I'm going to need to finish my next few videos. And when I'm out, I'm going to be on the lookout for some good drone shots. And when maybe the birds aren't coming out to play, I'm going to work on some of the shots that are on my list for multiple videos. In terms of the types of shots I try to get, I'm usually looking to find shots to show the audience where I am and what I'm doing. I want you, the viewer, to be on the adventure with me. So this might be a combination of aerial footage, B-roll of the sights and sounds of nature, and some shots of me walking around, talking, and shooting. Oh, and as an aside, making videos about bird photography is a little bit different than other types of photography, like landscape, because landscape photographers can usually set their tripod down, stop, and talk you through their entire shot before they take it. I know sometimes the conditions can change quickly and it makes it tough, but with bird photography, the conditions always change. The birds are usually moving around so much that it's better just to take the shot first and explain how you did it later. Now, I have managed to solve for this a little bit by capturing some footage with the Pocket 3 mounted to the top of the camera. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. But anyways, back to the point. If you're good at planning ahead and you intend to, say, release weekly videos, you could potentially get all the shots you need for a whole month in one weekend if you do it right. Then, you have a lot of wiggle room to try new things and fail, to have worry-free days when the weather's bad, or even if you just want to take a break, play some video games or something without stressing about deadlines. It enables you and empowers you to do that. But alright, I think that's a good segue into talking about some of the things that I don't like about making videos on YouTube. The first is the whole draw towards satisfying the YouTube algorithm. YouTube is owned by Google, which is one of, if not the largest ad company in the world. For YouTube to be successful and make money, it needs to convince people to stay on the platform and watch as many paid ads as possible. So naturally, the platform is going to have a financial incentive to push videos that attract viewers and therefore advertising dollars, and to suppress those that do not. This creates this hyper-competitive environment where creators who want to be successful are looking at their stats, seeing what videos do well, and feeling pressure to rush and grab your attention with the catchiest and loudest titles and thumbnails. One more thing that frustrates me too is that, at least in my area, it is so hard to find a place that's completely quiet to be alone and record. It feels like everywhere I go is just bursting at the seams with people. And when there are people, there's noise and there's distractions. I actually had to laugh in one video last year where I was filming somewhere where I thought I was completely isolated and alone, and then all of a sudden the whole shot was interrupted by a random loud train that was just driving by nearby. And then a few weeks later, I was filming on a quiet, isolated beach when all of a sudden a random boat full of people just showed up and parked right behind me in the shot. And I can't tell you how many shots I've had to redo because some dog just started barking midway through my shot. But there are actually a lot of things I do like about filming on YouTube. I mean, having a regular goal to create videos does drive me to get up, get outside, and go to new places that I probably wouldn't have gone without the motivation. I also love the editing process. I've actually edited using both Final Cut Pro and DaVinci Resolve, and I like them both. Just getting to sit down in front of my widescreen monitor with a cup of coffee and to just put together this whole cinematic video experience for my viewers just completely quenches my creative thirst, if you will. Oh, and speaking of editing, here's another tip for you. To save myself a little time and to reduce some rework, I created this template for a typical video in Final Cut that has all of the folders that I'm typically going to make for things like footage and music and voiceovers and photos, and I compressed it all into a single zip file and then put it on an external hard drive. Then when I'm ready to edit, I just extract the zip file and move all of my footage and music and stuff into those project folders so that when I open the project, my template's there and I'm ready to roll. And just to take a step back, my general advice is that if there's any type of repeatable editing thing that you do, try to find a way to save it as a preset or as a template so that you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel in every single video. I find that little shortcuts like that really help me to keep up with the really demanding pace of one video every single week. Okay, so I've gone on a little bit of a tangent here, so back to my favorite YouTube things. One thing that I would say that I really low-key enjoy is that when people I know personally have watched one of my videos and they reach out to tell me that they enjoyed it. I can't really explain why that is, but I just find that really satisfying for some reason. But if I really think about it, the thing that I appreciate the most about YouTube is that I think it makes me a better photographer. I think that it's true that you can't really master something until you can explain it back in a way that's correct and accurate, but concise enough and simply enough that a newcomer could understand it. That said, making photography tutorials on YouTube forces me to practice explaining something again and again and again, which helps me to learn it, hopefully one day master it, and become a better photographer along the way. And all in all, making videos is fun and that's what counts, right? Okay, that about wraps us up for today. If you enjoyed this content and you want to see more, please consider subscribing, thumbs upping, doing all those YouTube things, hitting all those YouTube buttons. Really helps to send this video to more people and to grow the channel. Cheers to a year on YouTube, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!